A few years ago, I was in a helicopter ride on my way to the Himalayan mountains, and I texted my wife, "I love you," because I was positive we were going to crash, and I thought we were going to die. And I had been training and preparing for the climb in the mountains for over 6 months. I was probably the most physically fit I have ever been in my life. I had spent a fortune buying the best climbing gear and clothes that money can buy, and I had hired one of the best guide companies in the world. And all of that preparation, planning, training was irrelevant in the helicopter at that moment. And that experience completely changed how I look at life. And in today's video, I'm going to share a little bit more about that story and the lessons that I took away from my experience in Nepal. In today's video, I'm going to cover 3 things. I'm going to go over what the difference between being confident is and truly having a plan in place and how you can determine which one you have. I'm going to go over why the most experienced climber in our group moved the slowest and what that taught me. And I'm going to go over how my experience at the summit reframed how I look at achieving goals. I'm Brennan, Decima, mediocre mountain climber and certified financial planner, and I've helped thousands of families navigate their retirement. I'm going to share some of the brief details of these stories today, but if you'd like to learn more, I've talked about them in depth in my book, The Summit and Beyond, and the link for that is in the description. So I want to start with the helicopter story. Normally when you climb in the Himalayas, you take a prop plane from Kathmandu to Lukla, which is the gateway of the Himalayas. And Lukla is known as the most dangerous landing strip in the world. It's up in the Himalayas, very tiny landing strip on the side of a cliff, and you need perfect conditions to land there. And weather had grounded all flights to Lukla for 2 days. Finally, we got a little bit antsy in Kathmandu. We decided to charter a helicopter. Now, we split the group into 2 different helicopters. Our guide went with one group, and then I was in the group without the guide. Our Sherpas took a bus. So they left the day before to save cost on the cost of the trip. And as we're flying to Lukla, a storm rolls in, we lose all visibility, we lose contact with dispatch, and the helicopter is just plummeting. And at that moment, I thought it was the end. I thought it was over, so I'm texting my wife. Now, we ended up landing on the side of a cliff, basically in a rice paddy in the middle of nowhere. Helicopter propellers are still flying. Pilot hops out. He starts pulling, our backpacks off the helicopter, throwing them into the field in the rain. And then the guy just gets back in the helicopter and leaves. And we're standing there in the pouring rain. We don't speak the language. We don't have a guide. We don't have a Sherpa. We don't know where we are. We don't know what direction Lukla is. And we finally find out that basically to get to Lukla, they point at this muddy path that looks like it's straight up. None of us are wearing climbing gear. None of us have food. None of us have water. And we just take off. And that experience really taught me that you can be incredibly confident, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a good plan. And I had prepared extensively, and I was in physically shape where I could handle this, but the probability of a helicopter crash seemed so small, it didn't even cross my mind. I didn't think about that catastrophe. The concept of possibly having to climb that day didn't even cross my mind. So I wasn't wearing the right clothes. I didn't have the right shoes. I didn't expect to not eat for 8 hours. So I had no snacks and no nutrition. I expected to land at an airport where I'd get water. So I had no hydration. So I ended up doing an 8-hour climb in the wrong shoes and the wrong clothes. And when we finally made it to Lukla, I was chafed, I was blistered, I was drained, and I was dehydrated. So I set myself back on the climb astronomically because I didn't have a plan for if things went wrong. And a lot of people get to retirement in a very similar way. They're incredibly confident because they've prepared for decades. They've saved for decades. They have everything they need for that climb into retirement. But a true plan is not hoping everything goes right. A plan is having a clear set of actions and steps the moment something goes wrong. So thinking about what catastrophes will occur and having the steps to navigate them in the most comfortable way. So you can have a plan which will build more confidence, but being confident doesn't necessarily mean you have the best plan. It just means you might be able to figure it out in the moment. And when we figure it out in the moment, it doesn't tend to be the optimal way. So yes, I made it to Lukla, but I made it there covered in blisters. I made it there dehydrated, and I made it there completely drained from not having any nutrition. Whereas if I would have packed snacks, packed water, packed hiking clothes, a catastrophe would have still occurred, but I would have had a plan to address it and make the experience much less stressful. So fortunately, the next day, we reconnect with the rest of our group in Lukla, and the following day, we start the real climb, and each day in the Himalayas, you climb for 8, 10, 12 hours, getting to a little bit of a higher altitude, and you go from tea house to tea house. And I made a very rookie and foolish mistake coming out of the gate where I wanted to prove to everyone in the group that I was in great shape and that I was a good climber and that I was physically fit. So I was at the front of the pack every day. I'm the first one to the tea house at night. I'm drenched in sweat. I'm getting a good workout. But I noticed that our guide, his name's Dave Ashley, he was by far the most proficient and experienced climber. He has Guinness World Records. He's done all 7 summits. He had done Everest. Really, really strong climber. He was always at the back of the group. And I finally asked Dave, I said, hey, what's going on? Why are you always at the back of the pack? And there was 2 things that he said that just clicked with me. The first was, when we get to altitude, we can't hydrate quickly. So I want to preserve my reserves now for when I need them. I don't want to sweat. I don't want to lose electrolytes. The second thing is, when I go at a slower pace, I'm focused on my breathing and enjoying the view and enjoying the conversation. I don't want to just get it over with as quickly as possible. And I find that life and retirement work similar. So I think the people, and we're all guilty of doing this, but I realized that my own ego was making things tougher for me. And trying to impress others was making things tough for me. So in retirement, I often find that the people that don't necessarily worry about keeping up with the Joneses and spending money trying to impress their neighbors or friends or family tend to focus on spending money on things that provide fulfillment or provide purpose. And that becomes a much more comfortable use of money than always trying to figure out what to spend money on to impress someone else. The second thing that I find is the concept of protecting our reserves for when we need them. So it's easy in good times to not think about down the road. But with investing, a lot of people, when times are good, they want to just keep going as fast as possible. And they want to get to that higher balance as quickly as possible. But the key is eventually we're going to see tough market times, and we don't know when they're going to come. We don't know when we're going to need to be prepared. So in retirement, it's critical, especially at the beginning, to build that reserves and protect ourselves for when we face those challenges and when we need more protection. So not taking too much risk in retirement, having that protection bucket in place, I think is really, really key. And then finally, we don't want to just zip through work and retirement as quickly as possible. We want to enjoy the time with those we care about and enjoy the view along the way. I think that's really important. So the night before our summit push was one of the more difficult nights. So coming from Florida at sea level, I was very concerned about altitude and how my body would handle it. And a lot of people in the group came from Colorado or Utah. They're used to altitude, not me. So I bought a hypoxic chamber, which simulates sleeping with reduced oxygen. It sucks the oxygen out of a tent. But what it didn't factor in, and what I had no way to prepare for, is sleeping at those altitudes. I was used to the oxygen, but when you lay flat, the pressure, there's not enough pressure on your chest. So when you lay flat, it actually feels like you're having heart palpitations. So you have to stack your bags up and sleep at an angle. So very difficult to sleep. Finally figured this out and was able to get a little bit of sleep. And it felt like the moment I fell asleep, I hear this screaming from the tent next to me. And we get out, we go over to see what's going on. And one of the other members of our group was hallucinating. She thought she had spiders all over her. Her face was completely swollen. It looked like she had been stung by a bunch of bees. And there was protocols in place. They knew that she couldn't finish the climb. She couldn't do the summit. She had to descend. They knew what medicine that she should be given. They were giving her, ginger soup. They had all kinds of protocols in place for this scenario. And that moment taught me that it does not matter how much you prepare. It does not eliminate the fact that danger can occur. So my confidence on the mountain was not that bad things couldn't happen. My confidence was thinking through if certain bad things occurred, that we had ways to handle and address those issues. So in this person's case, the protocol was it didn't matter how much money you paid. If you're at risk of a brain aneurysm or a brain bleed, you go down, right? That's the protocol. And with financial planning, we can pretend that danger doesn't exist and we can prepare all we want, but preparing for retirement doesn't eliminate the risk of a market crash. It doesn't eliminate the risk of one spouse dying or, a health scare. So a good plan is not ignoring those. A good plan is having a clear set of steps. So if the market drops, how does that impact your income? Do we have a plan to continue to maintain our quality of life without selling things at a loss? If the market drops, do we have a plan for how much we're going to buy where it doesn't jeopardize our protection bucket? If we have a health scare, do we know exactly what's funding the cost for that? And do we know who is taking care of your affairs while you're dealing with that? And if someone in the family passes away, who is responsible for what? So the goal for planning is not to plan away danger. Danger and risk will continue to present themselves, but it's thinking through what risks are present and having that protocol for exactly what to do when it occurs. Now, the final lesson I learned came on the summit, and the summit day is technically a night. So you leave before midnight, strap on a headlight, you pack enough nutrition to hopefully get to the top. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then you trudge at extremely high altitudes at the slowest walking speed you've ever walked, while your heart thinks that you're at the fastest sprint you've ever ran. And for hours and hours and hours, you're just walking in the dark, and you look up and you can't tell if it's headlights above you or stars. You look down and it's the same thing. You feel like you're above the stars. And I just remember finally hitting this moment where I felt like I couldn't go on, and I just felt like giving up. And then fortunately, at that moment, the sun rises, and it's the most beautiful sight I've ever seen. And literally and metaphorically, I felt like I was coming out of darkness into the light, and it just gave me this second wind and this energy. I could see the summit. I knew where I was going, and I was determined to get there. And we make this push to the summit, and I am just flooded with emotions. I feel joy, pride, relief, and then I start crying. And, I had been pouring all of this energy and time and effort into this goal. And now I hit it, and it was like, well, what next? I hadn't thought about anything after the summit. I had nothing to look forward to. And I was just so almost depressed. I was very sad, and I felt very empty. It was a very unsettling feeling. And then my Sherpa smacks me, says, hey, let's take a picture. Congratulations. We got to get down. We're at altitude. We can't stay up here. So there was a few takeaways from that. One, the goal is important to celebrate. When you achieve big things, celebrate them. But the goal itself should not be the sole determination of happiness. It's a step along the way. So retirement, I think a lot of people think that when they are no longer working, that retirement day is going to give them joy that just lasts forever. They're no longer working. And in reality, they may have that initial euphoria, that pride and accomplishment and just feeling, but the feeling of what comes next tends to come shortly thereafter if they have not given consideration to how to spend their day. So the real joy in retirement comes from not just the day, celebrate the day, have the party, but The real joy in retirement comes from being able to create a path and looking at each day and designing it in a way where you're spending it with the people that fill your energy cup, with activities, hobbies, and causes that give you purpose, joy, and fulfillment going forward. So celebrate the day, but also celebrate each moment afterwards and think about what comes next as opposed to just the finish line. So my time in Nepal taught me these three things. It taught me that confidence is not a plan, and preparing doesn't eliminate danger. It just gives you the steps needed to deal with the risks that pop up along the way. The second thing that it taught me is that it's not about impressing others or going at anyone else's pace, but the right one for you. And finally, the summit is not the end of your journey. It's halfway. And retirement is just the start of the next part of the adventure. So designing the path and enjoying the view after the summit is just as important, if not more important, than making it to the top. I'm Brennan Decima, owner of Decima Wealth Consulting. If you want to hear more about the story, I wrote about it in depth in my book, The Summit and Beyond. The link is in the description. And if you need help designing your retirement and putting a vision for your next chapter in place, I do work with a select number of families where we help them customize their retirement, cash flow, investment, tax, and legacy strategy. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. The next video on the screen is how to turn your nest egg into retirement income. And thank you for your time. I'll look forward to seeing you next week.